I have stared into the face of joy, and it looks an awful lot like the receptionist from The Devil Wears Prada. But really, how nice was it of Disney to give Lin-Manuel Miranda his own movie, huh? I'm not even kidding there. Lin-Manuel Miranda could arguably be called the lead of this thing. Like, Mary Poppins Returns positions him as a sort of Dick Van Dyke standing, complete with a really ropey, core blimey shtick, and Mary Poppins kind of feels more like the added value element. It's neither here nor there anyway, the movie's great. It's essentially a straight-up generational sequel to the first one. It's now post-war London, and the Banks kids are now the adults, and Michael's a bank teller at Fiduciary Financial and has kids of his own, and his wife's recently passed, and thanks to money worries too, dude's gonna lose the family home. But never fear, Lin-Manuel Miranda is here! I'm kidding now. Mary Poppins just shows up one windy afternoon as she does, and she's got a revived remit to look after the Banks children, but, in doing so, she might just save Mr. Banks, too. Can you imagine that? Anyway, here's your spoonful of sugar.
I suspect, and I'm never incorrect, that you're far too old to give in to imagination. No, not yet. Some people like to splash and play. Can you imagine that? And take a seaside holiday. Can you imagine that? Too much glee leaves rings around the brain. Take that joy and send it down the drain. Some people like to laugh at life and giggle through the day. They think the world's a brand new shiny toy. And if while dreaming in the clouds they fall and go ka-splat, although they're down and bent in half, they brush right off and start to laugh. Can you imagine that?
So, on top of being just a terrific Mary Poppins revival, Mary Poppins Returns is just a good old-fashioned dose of old-school Hollywood fun. It's an all-singing, all-dancing joy fest with all the staging and grandeur and song and dance wonder of yesteryear that even manages to squeeze in a short round of Hamiltoning because, well, Lin-Manuel Miranda's in this. In fact, we should probably get out of the way good and quick. So, in the 5 or so years that Hamilton's been a thing, Lin-Manuel Miranda's become a sort of overnight instant musical icon, and it's kind of weird that he's not really had a proper breakout movie launch off the back of that. I mean, until now, obviously. I mean, yeah, his fingerprints are all over Moana, I suppose, but this really marks the first time the man's got a flagship star vehicle he can genuinely sit his name on top of, and, well, it's a good one. I mean, the man's as likable and charming as ever. He can obviously handle the performance and the choreography side of this in his sleep. And, well, he's just got a sweet bit of chemistry with, the rest of the cast. Let's be honest though, there's only one person on that cast you really care about showing up, and, well, her name's in the title, and despite just how untouchably iconic you would think Mary Poppins actually would be, Emily Blunt turns out to just be a terrific successor to Julie Andrews. And sure, it's a little bit jarring at first to see this recognizable Hollywood star of today playing this long-established icon, but, Disney corporate practices demand that this character gets assimilated into Disney canon immediately, and evidently the Disney Infinity figure just wasn't statement enough to that effect. So enter Emily Blunt, who absolutely proves that you can keep this character going without in any way having to dump on the original. Admittedly, there's a teensy bit of impersonation going on in the early stages, but not distractingly so. It's sort of like playing Elvis in that way that you kind of need to get a couple of ahas in before you can really start tinkering with the engine and making it fly and making it your own. And Blunt's more than up for that, and she's got the same kind of steely resolve and that sort of Time Lordy quality that keeps her in place as the one in the room at all times with all the riddle-ridden answers. And I kind of thought she actually let the softer, more fun side of Mary Poppins out in a way that Julie Andrews sort of never really got the chance to do. I don't want to say it's an Oscar-worthy performance from Blunt, but she will get some awards buzz for that, and it's deservedly so. She's just great here. on a story level, it's a touch more streamlined than that Robert Stevenson, 1964 original. It's a musical, so it's obviously got to have those sort of song and dance beats and the narrative flow, but it's one of those that's kind of more in step with something like recently like The Greatest Showman, in that it uses those moments and those breaks to kind of reinforce how you're individually connecting with all the characters at the same time, and as a result, it never feels too forced or jarring. I mean, it helps that the songs are all really great, really, really great, and genuinely expect to see the soundtrack to this on a lot of people's Spotify queues this Christmas. And the way these songs are executed and the way they're staged and performed is so bombastic and engaging that you almost forget this somehow comes from the dude who made Into the Woods. Incidentally, so David McGee, who's the guy who wrote this, he also wrote Finding Neverland and The Life of Pi, and that sort of pedigree, that kind of does shine through. He succeeds quite well in making the period setting feel like this sort of grand fantasy world unto itself, and it's laugh out loud hilarious at times too. But really, big ups to director Rob Marshall. I mean, I rag on Into the Woods a lot, mainly because, it sucked, but he's calling back to his work on things like Chicago and Nine here, and it really shows. I mean, it probably helps, to be honest, that he's got a little bit more of a limited physical canvas to work with in Mary Poppins, you know what I mean? You've got to do the bank's house, and you've got to do a bit of the bank. There's got to be a bit that's just in a little bit of the park, and yeah, it kind of works. It keeps him off the whole fairy tale spectrum, and that kind of turns out to be a really good idea. The results kind of speak for themselves. Marshall's given it kind of whimsy and wonder and even genuine astonishment at times, and it's all in service to what could really have just been dealt with as a sort of throwaway sequel, rather than this really impressive let's go old school approach that they've done instead. Well played, Rob. Well played. I hereby agree to just forget Pirates of the Caribbean 4 forever. Okay, now don't mess up the Little Mermaid, and for God's sake, just give Alyssa Milano some kind of cameo, some kind now. She deserves something. So, you'd obviously assume that if you're not a fan of Mary Poppins, this one won't be for you, but take it from me, I am decidedly not a Mary Poppins fan. Other than being iconic, I don't really see much going for it, but Mary Poppins Returns is awesome. It's so sweet, and nice, and happy, and fun, and you just can't help but find it all so infectious. And Dion Beebe, who's been Rob Marshall's cinematographer on most of his movies, he brings the movie to life as this kind of grand Christmas family tale in that sort of a way that the Paddington movies did, and trust me, this will become a go-to Christmas flick in years to come. I mean, I'm going to be hitting Greatest Showman pretty hard this holiday, but I can absolutely see this one being the go-to DVD or Blu-ray next year or whatever for a lot of homes next Christmas. I mean, not a doubt in my head. Mary Poppins Returns is just the perfect movie to end the year on. It's got great performances. I mean, so great that I almost forgot to mention how good Ben Whishaw and Emily Mortimer are, and they're great too, don't worry. It's also well realized, it's well captured, it's powered by an absolutely thundering soundtrack. It looks incredible, it feels incredible. In fact, I almost want to join every other critic in calling it practically perfect in every way, were it not for the marketing department having seriously dropped the ball on the whole Dick Van Dyke thing, not once, but twice in the space of a single shot in the trailer. Shame on you, Disney! That man's a goddamn treasure! I mean, you treat him right. I mean, now that we've lost Stan Lee, Dick's all we got to remind us what happiness used to feel like. So, unquestionable, 4 stars from me. I went in pretty baseline, like I say, not a Poppins guy, kind of prefer Saving Mr. Banks, but I left the screening for this just grinning ear to ear like I was the goddamn Joker. It's the perfect time at the movies this Christmas, so go with your friends, your parents, your kids, your grandparents, whoever. Just go and see it with as many people as you can find, and I promise afterwards the foyer is just going to instantly evolve into that sort of weird daddy's home to makeshift Christmas party. It's that good a time. Go see it. It's absolutely tremendous. I hope it becomes as huge as it looks like it could be, and they wind up bringing Emily Blunt back for a sequel set in the 60s or the 70s or something. I'll be first in line, but until then, I'll be right back in line to sit my ass through this 2 or 3 more times. Not quite as great meanwhile, but also, strangely, a revisit to a 50-year-old flick is the long gestating remake of Papillon that hit cinemas this week. The original 1973 Papillon's one of those that's remembered, but not really remembered fondly enough to be considered a classic movie, admittedly. This time around, instead of Steve McQueen and Dustin Hoffman, you've got Charlie Hunnam and Rami Malek filling out the cells of the sort of French prison colony. Hunnam, who's, the man of 1,000 accents and the master of literally none, he's the new Pappy, he's the slick safecracker who's framed for a crime he didn't commit, and Malek, who's sort of weirdly still in Freddie Mercury mode, he's the wealthy incarcerated forger with whom Pappy builds this enduring friendship in his many prison escape attempts. This has been kicking around for a while now, and I can't particularly see why. I mean, sure, there's not really much of an audience for Papillon in 2018, but there wasn't really in the 1970s either. I mean, to be frank, this sort of sits on the quality spectrum with a lot of the sort of mid-budget, mid-profile Hollywood remakes of the noughties, like The Flight of the Phoenix and Assault on Precinct 13, and you'll find it perfectly watchable, but you're not really gonna remember it the following day. Though, to be fair, Flight of the Phoenix only really got around that by way of rather liberal use of like Tyrese and Massive Attack, if we're honest. It's the first English-language film of Danish director Michael Noe, and he handles himself pretty capably. There's a sprinkling of pretty decent imagery in there, and the pacing just about keeps your interest, keeps you in there. But on the whole, Papillon just feels pretty thankless. I mean, we've seen Hunnam phone this kind of thing in a lot lately, and Malik's kind of seriously in danger of running his Asperger's genius routine into the ground after what was basically the cultural explosion of Bohemian Rhapsody and what feels like the never-ending lithium trip that's Mr. Robot nowadays. But he's fine too. They're both fine. It's not terrible. The whole film is just fine. It's 2 stars, really. I mean, why on earth you'd remake Papillon and dial down the bug eating? That mystifies me. Like, why leave that bit out? It's kind of like remaking The Shawshank Redemption with a portrait of Whistler's mother. I mean, you can, but why bother? Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, rate, and review.